Hey everybody, Greg Raffner with KPI Podcast, and today we have Irina Hollatz on our podcast with us today. Irina is the founder of Right Workforce Management, RightWFM, and host of WFM Unfiltered podcast, which I think I'm going to be joining with her here shortly. So excited to join her on her podcast. Today we're going to be talking about vendors and implementation and kind of what goes right, what goes wrong, who's at fault when things go wrong. Probably debatable depending upon which side of the conversation you're on. So Irina, thank you for joining us, and please take a moment and say hi.
Hey guys, thanks for having me, and hi to all of the listeners of the podcast. And I'm so happy to be here after a long weekend for you guys. Exhausting long weekend, but a great one.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. All right, so Irina, when we were chatting and kind of prepping for this, we were kind of bouncing around some ideas, and we really kind of, when we brought up the idea of talking about just overall like working with vendors and implementing technology, you kind of got excited about that. So why is this something you want to talk about?
Oh, because I've been in from all sides of the fence, so I know when things usually go wrong. And I don't know, lately we're talking about investments in technology overall and how we can boost results and make the life easier for the customer, for your agents or frontline personnel in general. And it sounds great. But when you start doing implementations, usually it can be quite shitty. So you end up investing in something that doesn't bring any value. Quite the opposite. It can hold you back and can be kind of detrimental for your performance. So yeah, let's just trash talk someone. What do
Okay.
we
So I think so we're obviously abstract's a vendor, right? And so
do?
everybody goes into implementations with the best intentions. I mean, I hope everybody goes into implementations with the best intentions. Um, let's talk just a little bit about like you kind of said like, shitty experience. Like, have you talked to me about an experience you had where maybe it didn't go right? And from your perspective, were expectations misaligned? Like, where does it start to go shitty?
Well, to be fair, it's not always vendor's fault. So don't get me wrong. And you're right. Everybody goes into it with the right intentions, but it is a business after all. If you don't sell, you don't survive, and your employees will not be part of the company. The thing for me that I think the issue always starts is I always say you don't know what you don't know. So prospect perspective, I'm going to conversations with you and I'm telling you, okay, this is what I need. These are my challenges. This is what I would like to see. And that's everything I know. And it's up to you to tell me, okay, we can help you with this, with second, with third, with the fifth. And often there is kind of a gap in experience on both sides. So once you start going into the implementation, then the prospect says, oh, actually we have this and this and this requirements, and we need you to be able to accommodate those requirements. You're saying to me, oh, but you should have told me that before we signed the contract, because we actually don't provide those requirements. So you see that there is a gap. And this is where technically maybe nobody is at fault, because the prospect didn't know what you would need. You didn't know that the prospect had something else they need to deliver. And it goes downhill from there on. So I've usually been brought up in a lot of implementations halfway, when there is that kind of a situation where we bought the software, don't want to use it, we're going to go back to Excel, but we paid for it, but we hate it, and it doesn't deliver what we want it to deliver. And it's usually, how do you drive that communication? You need to meet somewhere in the middle.
So let's back up and let's talk about like before the contract is signed, because I think you're right. Like as a prospect, a company looking to buy software, maybe you've done some research, maybe you haven't, maybe you've gone through kind of people, process, and result, and kind of landed on technology. Now you're at that point where you need technology to change, but you don't know what you don't know, and so you don't even know what questions to ask if you haven't bought this category of software before. So is it prospect's fault then for not knowing what they don't know, or is it the vendor's fault for not proactively inserting some of those maybe gotchas along the way, knowing it might blow up their deal and they might not close them as a customer?
Oh, I I would argue both sides. Like they also might not know what they don't know. I'm giving you a very good example. In Eastern Europe, we have very tough legislation, which is quite different from the rest of the world. So usually when we're bringing any type of WFM software, people and consultants don't cannot put it into perspective our legislation because we're doing with monthly scheduling with annualization of hours, but they are working in a very specific way of calculation to the rest of the world in a way that the software is not developed for. So nobody who has not worked and lived in Eastern Europe would know about that. So whose fault is it that you didn't ask me how it would work? Because how would you assume it's not going to work this way? So this is a very specific example where I would argue both sides that it's no one's fault, but it happened. And this is where things can get quite shitty. But in fairness, often vendors do want to close a deal and they are disregarding something that they know it's going to be a gap. And they're doing the sale and then they're dealing with the outcome aftermath afterwards. So what's your view, Greg? Tell me about it.
I think having been in software sales for 11 years now makes me feel really old when I say that number out loud. I think I've learned, like early in my sales career, I was all about just get the deal done. But I learned over time that there's actually a lot of pain associated with that approach. Like, if you're selling something that doesn't work out the right way or you're misleading folks, you don't get referrals, you don't get renewals, you don't get upsells. Like you might even get your commission clawed back if the customer just pieces out and stops paying the contract. And so my perspective is it's always better to be upfront with folks and tell them, hey, we don't do this, or here's the things that you're not thinking about that you should be thinking about. One of those things might actually be the reason why you don't pick us, because it's less painful in the long term. Like it hurts less if everybody's upfront about what you can and can't do from a feature functionality standpoint. And I think that's taken time to learn that. And so, I think it's easier to just be upfront and be like, hey, we're not a good fit. And Irina, the best part about it is when I tell a prospect, hey, we're probably not a good fit, here's why, they're always like, hold on, how do I still work with you guys? Like, hold on, you're telling me I can't have you? Now I want you. So,
but this is where you're building trust, and this is what I like. And I'm always telling to vendors I'm working with, just whatever you do, don't lie to me, because this for me is very disrespectful. Tell me exactly where I'm going to struggle with, and I'm more than willing to work with you to find a way to make it work. But if I know that I'm asking you something and you're disrespectful towards me or the client in a way that you know it's going to come biting us back, but you still decide not to tell me about it, then it's an entirely different conversation.
Yeah. So, okay, let's flip it around to the other side, right? Prospects, right? Maybe they come in with unrealistic expectations. Mm-hmm. Maybe they want the world, but they don't want to pay for it and they want it yesterday. So how do you, thinking about this from the prospect side, right? If we can say the vendor is honest, how do we hold the prospect to the same level of accountability and realistic expectations in terms of what they're buying at the price point they're buying it for?
It's a great question. And honestly, I don't think there's often a lot of accountability on the prospect side as well. The thing is that WFM is notorious to never have budget for anything. And if we at some point get the budget, we're absolutely terrified of going wrong with the decision that we're making. So we tend to get stressed. We tend to start asking for everything, blaming it on the vendor. They can't deliver this, they can't deliver that. And often my perception and my experience is that we're kind of using it as out to say that this vendor is not good enough and we need to kind of break the relationship just because we don't seem to make it work. It's obvious that somebody made the wrong decision. And from organizational perspective, You said yes, you chose as a user that vendor. Okay, you're responsible for the outcome of this one. So it is a thing. As external party, I'm always saying, listen, that's the situation. We can get the most out of it, but we need to be honest with the vendor, and there should be some sort of accountability on both sides. And you need to understand that not a single software, whether it's WFM, telephony, CRM, or just pick your tooling, that will be a fit for every single company. That's just not going to happen. Never. And you need to decide, okay, which part are the ones that are the most valuable for you as a user that you can apply for your organization, and which are the things that you would like to be at peace with that you're not going to be having. But it should be a frank conversation between both parties. And you know what? I'm now thinking, never have I ever been in a situation where I put the cards on the table and say, that's the situation. Let's see how can we make the best out of it. And people say, no, let's backstab each other. Let's continue trash talking each other. I don't know. What do you think?
I think most people don't like actively wake up in the morning and go, I'm just going to screw somebody over today. That's not, at least I hope not. I think we can both agree that there's shady actors on both sides. How to, as a start of the customer side,
I think it's insecurity, at least from WFM perspective. As I said, you don't know what you don't know, and you're insecure and you're kind of relying. And a lot of the times, to be honest, what I have seen, it's also fit of personality rather than fit of capability. So if you end up really, really liking that solution consultant or the team behind the tool, this is where you're feeling more confident and start being like, oh, I think this is going to be a great relationship. On the other hand, as I said, targets are a thing for vendors as well. And if they're not selling, they're not surviving. So we need to acknowledge that this is part of the game.
So how do we mitigate risk then? Let's start again from the customer side. As a customer looking to evaluate vendors, how do you mitigate the risk associated with picking the wrong vendor? Like, what's a process you go through? Tips and tricks. Like, pick three. Let's give me three. What are three things I can do to make sure I'm picking the right solution and I'm honest about the solution that I'm wanting?
I would say first thing is ask for recommendations from other users, but not users that are picked up by the vendor, because they're always going to put forward their raving fans, right? So whatever it's your community, whether you're subscribed to a paid one, whether you're part of LinkedIn, whether you have friends in different organizations, just ask, what have you learned? What's your relationship? How does it work? And just do your research from user perspective and not only from the websites of the vendors as well. Then for me, the most important thing is to list everything that you know that you would need and assume, and all your challenges. It's funny how the biggest issue that I'm having everywhere I go is lack of documentation. There's just the requirements are in someone's head. They change over time because something in the business changes. And then it's like a constant going through the email chain as, why did we do it like that? Who didn't see that? So document everything, send it over to your prospect, and equally so ask back for their comments in a written format so you have something to revert back to.
Yeah.
And the third thing is, I would say, set your success criteria. What do you want? Why do you need a tool? I have seen contact centers with 20 seats, 20 agents wanting to go for the most expensive WFM tool. I would never recommend that because I can't see what you would benefit, what would be the value of that. So if you don't set your criteria and your expectations, then in the end, what do you want the vendor to do for you? So those would be my top three.
Yeah, I like that. I think number two to me stands out. Get it in writing, right? Don't just pick up the phone and ask somebody, say, hey, I'm going to send you an email now, and you're going to confirm in writing of what you just said. Or put it in the contract, right? Like, hey, you can do this, this, and this. Great. Are you willing to put that in the contract? If they're not, like, run away. So yeah, always get it in writing. Okay. From a vendor's perspective, what are three things that you can do to make sure you're selling the right fit customer for the right reasons?
I mean, from vendor perspective, is kind of the reversed approach. I would still have the documentation from them. Okay, you know what? Those are the things that go through implementation. With regardless of the company that we're working with, we know that there is set of requirements that we usually need to cover from, let's say, legislation perspective. You need to have minimum rest between shifts. You need to have minimum time between your starting time and your break. So those are all things that you as a vendor know that you will be training your prospect on. Ask them in advance. This is how you can capture very easily the issue that I was bringing with Eastern Europe. If you ask us, how do you work? Are you do weekly scheduling or monthly scheduling? Explain me more about that. Then you would know exactly whether you're a fit or not. And then it's basically reversed from that. If you discover that, okay, we can meet 2, 3, 4, but we can do workarounds on the rest, then those are your success criteria as well. And you need to put that in the contract as well, because it's the same game for you. If you're blamed for something that was never part of the deal, what can you do?
Yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, it happens all the time. And I think at the end of the day, Irina, I feel like everybody should go into any type of business agreement or relationship with the understanding that things are going to go wrong. There was something missed. And then it's really down to the humans and how you treat each other after the fact and work through the problem, right? Whether the vendor, the customer, like whoever is at fault, like, great, we're here now. Let's put it behind us and just move forward. And like how you fix that, I think ultimately is what matters the most, right? Are you willing to work together with the party on the other side of the table to come to a middle ground? And like that comes down to the relationship that you have as humans.
You know what? You said it the best. For me, it comes down to responsibility and accountability and ownership of, okay, something was missed. And I found from all my years being as a manager that this is the most difficult thing for people to say, okay, I made a mistake. For me, as a manager, if one of my team members will tell me, I made a mistake, how can we fix it? I'm just going to go into a solution mode rather than, oh, I'm too scared. If I say I made a mistake, I'm going to be in trouble and my job will be jeopardized. Nobody is ever thinking you made a mistake. I'm going to sack you right then and there. And if you own up to it, take responsibility, then you instantly go into that solution mode that you mentioned. So I think this is in a psychological aspect here, the most difficult part.
Yeah, I mean, one of our core values here is extreme ownership. And so like regardless of who did it, like take ownership of it because that means you can fix it. And like you said, someone comes and is like, hey, I messed up. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it. Like the level of trust that just got established, right, is so high. And so if a customer comes to a vendor and was like, hey, we messed up on our requirements, can you help us with this? Like that's a lot better than, hey, you didn't tell us about this, right? Or it's your fault, right? Like it's always so much better just to take ownership of it. Which side of the argument you're on doesn't really matter, and just move forward and figure it out.
But it comes with certain sort of maturity because finger pointing is a thing. And for me, there's nothing more annoying than having to go back and forth who said what, who did what and when, and try to get to the bottom of the story just so we can start working on the issue. So if there's one thing that I would say as a general advice, regardless if you're vendor, prospects or whatever, work on your accountability and ownership. There's nothing wrong. It's actually a sign of maturity and being much more professional than it can get you in trouble.
Well, I was going to ask for like, what's your one big takeaway item as we wrap up, but you already gave it to me. So work on your accountability. Irina, this has been awesome. I appreciate the candid conversation. Some folks might not like the medicine that we dished out today, but sometimes
the free world.
Yeah. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. And accountability. I love it. Regardless of which side you're on, just be accountable to what happened and move forward. So thank you for joining us, and I look forward to being on your podcast very soon.
Thanks for having me, and I can't wait to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, cool. Bye, Irina.
Bye-bye.